Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar hosted by Preprints.org. So our webinar today is Who Has a Voice in Open Science? I'm your host for today. My name is Ioana Krasian, and I'm a scientific advisor for Preprints.org. So today I'm going to start with a brief introduction of all of our keynote speakers today, and then a couple of slides on preprints.org, and then we will move into the presentations and question and answer session. This will be followed by a roundtable discussion where you will have the chance to vote on what discussion topics are your favorites, so we can tackle those first, and then we'll end with some closing remarks for the webinar. And so I would have the pleasure to introduce our keynote speakers. Our first speaker today is Lloyd. He has a background in library and information science and is currently the product manager for preprints.org. So he oversees the platform's development and user engagement, fostering a collaborative academic community and advocating strongly for open access. Our second speaker for today is Daniela Saderi. Her background is in neuroscience, and she earned her PhD from Oregon Health and Science University. She is currently the co-founder and executive director for Pre-Review, which is a nonprofit that empowers researchers to engage in open peer review of preprints. Our third speaker is Jonny. He's originally an immunologist, and currently he acts as executive director and founder of Rippling Ideas. He also created and hosts a Preprints in Motion podcast, which advocates for preprints benefits, especially for early career researchers. And finally, our last keynote speaker for today is Lamis Elkheir. Her background is in pharmaceutical chemistry, and she is currently the Director of Training and Resource Development at the African Reproducibility Network. And this is a community-led initiative spanning 33 African countries. And so her work bridges science, training, and policy with a particular emphasis on amplifying the voices of African researchers in global scholarly communication. And so with this, thank you for joining us. And on behalf of everyone, I know we're really excited to hear your presentations for today. And so just to give a very quick introduction to preprints.org. And so we are a nonprofit multidisciplinary platform that is supported by the open access publisher MDPI. And so we post original research articles and reviews covering all research fields. We offer permanent archiving and also assign a DOI to each preprint, thus making them citable. Authors can also track article level metrics so they can see who's viewing their preprints, downloading, talking about them via the metric score. And so authors can also update their preprint, posting a new version. So the content on preprints.org is, of course, not peer-reviewed, but all of our authors can receive feedback from readers. I also wanted to highlight two key features that we think that empowers our authors, so that way their work can reach a wider audience. And so the first is we work very hard at preprints.org to form collaborations and networks, so that way the preprints we post get indexed in a wider variety of indexing databases. So for example, all of the preprints posted by us are indexed in Web of Science, Crossref, Google Scholar, Dimensions, PubMed. So we really hope that this helps the researchers reach the widest audience possible. Also, for all of our MDPI authors, they can share their work to preprints.org quite easily from the submissions platform, Suzy. So in the dashboard, it takes only one click, and then you can transfer your manuscript to preprints.org. And we think that this boosts the visibility and reach of your research. So now before we move into the presentations that we have today, I'm going to launch a poll so that way you can vote throughout the presentations on which one you think is a topic that we should discuss in the roundtable discussion. And so this will be open up until the end of the presentations, and I already see some people voting, so that's really great to see the engagement. Also, at the end of each presentation, you can use either the chat or the Q&A to ask any questions, and at the end of the presentations, we will the speaker will answer a few, depending on time. Okay, so with that brief introduction, I will give the floor to my colleague Lloyd, and he will talk to us about broadening science through preprints, visibility, and inclusion as the key points. So Lloyd, if you would like to share your screen now.
Hi everyone, I'm Lloyd, the product manager of Preprints.org. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. Open Science Imager Award, where knowledge flows freely and the science truly belongs to everyone. And you know what? In the past 2 decades, we have made some real progress. More and more papers are now open to read without hitting a paywall, and the researchers have gained more control over their own works. Compared to the past, we are living in a much better era. But let's pause and ask, who actually gets the voice in open science? That's where things get a little tricky. Many voices that deserve to be heard are still missing from the conversation. One of the most important ways is that of researchers themselves. Of course, research should have a voice in open science, and they do. But if we look closer, not all researchers have enough voice. Senior researchers usually do. Open science helps them to share their results faster and wilder, and that's great. But not every valuable piece of research gets the visibility it deserves. Traditional journals can take 6 months, even a year, just to publish a paper. That delay is still a big barrier. And what about negative and non-scientific results? Many of them never get published, even though they carry some values. Then there is the issue of resource. Open science haven't solved everything for underfunded researchers. And in some cases, it will even make things harder. Take the Golden Open Access Model, for example. It allows readers everywhere, even in source-limited regions, to freely access the paper, which is wonderful. But on the flip side, publishing costs become a barrier for many researchers, especially those from the Global South. They gain visibility as readers, but face barriers as contributors. That means truly global inclusive is still out of reach. And let's not forget students and the early career researchers. Many graduate students don't get the chance to see their work shared publicly during their training. They also lack platforms to discuss their findings, practice review skills, and growth as part of the research community. In other words, their voices are still too quiet. In short, while open science has come a long way, science is still not fully open to everyone. Many researchers are left waiting, unheard, and the unseen. So 2 big challenges remaining: visibility and inclusion. And that's exactly where preprints make a difference. Preprints don't just speed up science, they make it more open and more inclusive. So how do they do that? Preprints are powerful because they are fast and open. More and more researchers now rely on them to keep up with the latest discoveries. On Preprints.org, we see this every day. Many papers reach hundreds of readers in their very first month online, and some preprints draw hundreds of thousands of views with just weeks. That's the real impact of preprints. They don't just post research, they accurate its journey into the hands of researchers worldwide exactly when it matters most. Preprints don't just make research faster to share, they also make it more visible. And the increased visibility doesn't stop with preprints itself. Posting a preprint can also increase the attention and impact of the final journal article. Studies show that the preprints not only spark more discussion on social media, but also lead to higher citation counts. And the benefit happens fast and lasts over time. The chart on the right shows it clearly. Researchers compare articles with preprints, showing green, to those without, showing red, across multiple journals. You can see that the research with preprints gets more engagement on social media, and its journal article ends up seen more often. This shows that preprints don't just make research faster to share, it helps it reach more people, amplifies the visibility and the academic impact. And the benefit don't stop there. Another powerful feature of preprints is the multiple version updates, and it makes the research progress itself more visible. Science isn't just about the final result. The journey matters too. With preprints, readers can see how a study evolves over time, how authors refine their methods, improve analysis, or respond to feedbacks. This is valuable for researchers in the field, and it also provides the opportunity for students and early career researchers. By comparing versions, they can see how a paper is polished, gaining insight into good research practice and critical thinking. In this way, preprints don't just share results, they reveal the research programs. They promote transparency, learning, cooperation, and trust. And in doing so, they further enhance the visibility and impact of the work. Beyond visibility, preprints also promote greater inclusivity, giving more research a chance to share their work. Take Preprints.org as an example. We currently have over 377,000 authors from 186 countries and regions, with around 45% from the Global South, where there is still a gap compared to authors from Global North. It clearly demonstrates how preprints help broaden participation in science. Researchers from all over the world can share their findings, ensure the voice from every corner of the world are heard. Inclusivity also extends to the kind of the research that shared. Preprints give a platform to studies that may otherwise be overlooked, like negative or non-specific results. But no, negative results are far from worthless. They make science more transparent and trustworthy, showing us the whole picture, not just the exciting part. Take psychology as an example. You may have heard of the ego depletion theory, the idea that self-control works as a muscle that gets tired after use. Many replication studies have tried to test this effect, and quite a few found no specific result. By sharing this no finding openly, researchers helped the field realize that the effect might depend on context, and that's our understanding of self-control needs a second look. So negative results can actually move science forward. They save time and resource, showing what doesn't work, and make meta-analysis more accurate. Sharing them also fit with research ethics, helping science correct itself and earn public trust. Preprints make it easier. They give these quiet findings a voice and make sure they can be seen, used, and valued. Inclusivity is also about how research is discussed. Preprints foster a culture of open, constructive dialogue, emphasizing discussion over judgment. Preprints make discussion more open, diverse, and accessible. Readers can comment directly on the article, discuss them on social media, provide feedback on platforms like pre-review, or even engage through YouTube. When we look at these conversations, what we are seeing is researchers exchanging ideas and give constructive feedback, not just judging each other's work. You may notice someone pointing out a small typo or offering feedback on a specific section, where another comments on the paper as a whole. Sometimes they explore related approaches that the paper didn't cover, sharing their perspective openly. And often early career researchers jump in, ask questions, or looking for reference to deepen their understanding. Preprints not just make research easier to access, they create a level playing field for academic discussions. No matter where you are and what resource you have, you can share your thinking, giving feedback, and interact with field in real time. By breaking down traditional barriers, preprints help ensure that voices from around the world are heard, promoting fair and widespread sharing of knowledge. Of course, with all these benefits, preprints are not without challenges. Because they are not gone through formal peer review, the quality of individual preprints can be varied. This can raise concerns about the priority dispute or the misuse of the findings. Address these challenges requires a collective effort, and at Preprints.org, we have put several measures in place. Before posting, our editorial team conduct a basic check to ensure submissions meet ethical standards and have code-specific quality. Many researchers also assist in the programs, helping review manuscripts and provide feedback to authors. After posting, preprints come with commenting features so scholars can discuss the work by engaging more researchers in verification and discussion programs. These measures not only reduce the risk, but also accelerate the sharing of the scientific knowledge, that help science move faster while repairing the trust. To further address these concerns, Preprints.org clearly label all posted preprints as not peer-reviewed, reminding readers to use the findings carefully and help prevent the misuse of the funding research. These methods are helpful, but they are only part of the picture. Research themselves plays a key role in making preprints trustworthy and useful. The most important thing for a researcher is to approach preprints with a critical eye. Remember, preprints haven't been peer-reviewed, so they may contain flaws. Beyond that, researchers can actively participate in validating findings. Using commenting features on preprint service, third-party review sites, or social media to provide feedback and constructive criticals through the combined effort of preprint service and the research community. We can mitigate this challenge, help to ensure preprints continue to develop in a healthy, trustworthy way. While all these benefits in place, preprints help researchers share funding faster, more inclusively, and more openly, but the way we are communicating science is changing, and we are enter a multimedia era. People no longer get their knowledge only from long articles. Graphic abstract turn complex ideas into a single clear image. where radio abstract make research easier to understand and more engaging. That doesn't mean text-based preprints are losing their values. Far from it. Preprints still provide a detailed and complete record of research that images or videos cannot replace. But to magnetize the research impact, preprint service should offer ways for researchers to upload graphical and video abstract, making findings faster to dig in and easy to understand. Many publishers like MDPI and Springer Nature already offer service to help research create professional graphical and video abstracts. AI can also assist, generating visual summary videos that make it easier and more creative for researchers to share their works with the world. So to wrap up, preprints are more than just early version of papers. They make research faster, more visible, and more inclusive. They give more voices a chance to be heard, open up discussion across the world. But the story doesn't end there. With new tools like AI, graphical, and video abstract, preprints can do even more, make science more engaging and truly global. In the end, preprints remind us the essence of open science, knowledge that flows freely, ideas shared widely, and a research community where everyone can contribute, learn, and innovate. This is the future we're building, a future where science moves faster, reach further, and includes everyone. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lloyd, for that presentation. So we do have a question that I see here in the Q&A box, and that's for you, Lloyd. And so in your opinion, is open science truly for everyone? So all the laymen, people in the street, including non-academic people, can they have an equal voice and impact?
So I think it's maybe not everyone have the equal voice and the impact, but everyone should have enough voice. For example, for non-academic people, for the public, they should have the voice to show their interests. So they can show what is needed by the public, by the world. So the research community, the researchers should have more resource on this kind of the research. So the science is really benefit everyone, but that doesn't mean they really have the equal voice maybe to researchers or to other people maybe have more knowledge about that. So, but everyone should have the enough voice to show what they want.
And this question was from Samuel Yerushalami. I'm sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. Thank you so much for your question, Samuel. Let's see. I see there's a raised hand. Maybe. If you could type the questions in the Q&A or in the chat. I think we have time for one more. Okay. So we do have a question from Albrecht Klassen. How do we know that those who review a preprint are really qualified?
So I think for preprints, compared to traditional journal articles, the main difference is that for preprint service, we basically only check the basic requirement of our submissions, and we leave the right of review the quality of the research, or if it's good or groundbreaking. The right is to the research community. Everyone can have give their feedback or opinions about the preprints, about the idea showing in the research. And if we have a lot of people to do that, we will have a really fair opinion about the research.
Exactly. I also believe in that. The more people who participate, the quicker you reach the correct answer and conclusion, and you can really start interesting discussions that way. Okay, we have one more question. From Hala, it asks, how far advocating is good in reaching out to minor communities? So I'm guessing like, how far should we be advocating to reach out to everyone? Or maybe we can ask the next question. If preprint is not accepted, then it can be published in another journal, or will it show already published or plagiarism? I think this one is an important question. A lot of authors maybe fear that if their paper gets rejected before it's published in a journal, but there's a preprint out there, it might be considered plagiarism. So could you maybe just address this final question, Lloyd, before we move on?
Yeah, so that's not a problem for most of the journals. If you can check the journal's policy about preprints, I think maybe all of the OA journals are showing they accept preprints, and most of the journals also do that. So if you have preprints post, it doesn't mean you cannot submit your research to a journal, or you cannot submit your research to another journal if a journal rejects your work. It doesn't work in this way. Most of the journals don't think preprints as a pre-publication, so that would be fine.
Great. Okay, we will move on. Due to interest of time, maybe we will address, I'll keep note of some of these questions and maybe we can come back to them in the roundtable discussion and tackle some of them. So I'll make note of those. So now I'll turn the floor to Daniela. If you can go ahead and share your screen.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here with you all. I can't see you, but we can communicate on the chat. And if you can stop me at any point, but I'm grateful for the moderation and the Q&A at the end. So let me start sharing my screen, 1 second. So hello everyone again, and I love all the questions that have come so far, and the title of this panel is spot on what my interest is in, so I think you all know me very well, and the panelists show that. So it's an honor to be here with you all. My name is Daniela. I also go by Dani. I am a neuroscientist by training, so that was me working. I used to work with ferrets and specifically looking at studying how the auditory system works. And they were our friends with us for a long time. I missed some of that work, and some of the ferrets as well. They were learning really cool tasks that I don't know if I can learn myself. And I'm also the co-founder and executive director of Pre-Review. And the Pre-Review is a project, open science project that operates as a nonprofit. And I'll tell you a teeny bit about Pre-Review later. And these in the pictures are Dr. Monica Granados and Dr. Samantha Hindle, who are the two other co-founders of Pre-Review. I also consider myself, I will never stop being a Mozillian. Mozilla gave me the opportunity during my PhD to really discover a wide, broad global community of change seekers, of change activists in the space of science, and I continue to feel part of the community as we move forward, and the extended community of all the Mozillian around the world. And I live in Portland, Oregon, in the United States, even though I'm Italian, if you may have guessed from my accent. And I have 2 great children that keep me very busy, and a husband and 2 cats. I do live, as I mentioned, in the Portland metro area, and especially every day, but also today as an Indigenous, here in the United States is Indigenous Peoples Day. And I want to acknowledge and honor the incredible communities that have taken care of the land that I'm in, including the Multnomah, the Catlamet, Clackamas, Watala, and many other indigenous nations that have taken this region around the Columbia River as their home, and they were forcefully removed from their land by European settlers. And this is just a reminder that colonialism is not an event of the past. It is very active and ongoing, and these communities are still thriving despite of all the challenges. And I think we have a lot to learn and move forward, even in science, as I'm going to talk a little bit about more today. So one of my, this question sparked so many thoughts, so I tried to put my thoughts in the slides, but I started here, which is one of my favorite practices in the process of innovation, or really in anything that I do, is just blue sky dreaming. And I do like the night sky better, so that's the picture. But I love to imagine where transformative change can lead us. And that time for me spent in that kind of observatory of my mind, it takes me into a lot of great places. And when I allow myself to remove the barriers of reality and like stop thinking about, oh, but that can happen, I really get into this wonderful place in which everything that we are in is truly liberated from oppression. Just a future in which we truly are, there is a voice, everybody has a voice. And it's not just has a voice, but also is honored and valued for that voice. And you may be wondering why that has anything to do with science or open science or peer review, but I've been reminded over and over by colleagues and scholars around, and people really around the world, oppression is really everywhere. There is no space on earth in which oppression doesn't have a hold as a system. And even in science and scholarship is made of people with our beliefs, our values, the structure in which we've been raised, and we bring that with us when we do anything, as researchers, when we do peer review. So when I ask myself, is it really worth like operating on trying to like, if this is the goal, like I really want to help understand help getting us to a liberated future, is peer review and open science really what I should be? And I think that the answer is yes, because really you can do it anywhere where you are. But what is open science? Just like going back to the question, I think open science has many, many definitions. My personal relationship with open science began in 2016 when I was I stumbled upon this opportunity to attend OpenCon. It was a wonderful conference. This was Washington, D.C., 2016, the first week that Donald Trump was elected for the first time. It was an interesting time to be there, but the most transformational thing for me was witnessing a group of early career researchers and practitioners from 63 different countries, all in the room, fighting for change, fighting for true transformative change, questioning the status quo to a point that I've never seen. So it really hit me hard. I came back home and I was like, what is this? And it was, the open science movement, but even within that room, there were so many different approaches to what open science could do, where open science was. Obviously, a lot of people talking about access, but also a lot of people are talking about equity, inequities, and the need to really dig deeper into what are the possibilities for change that open science can bring. And so fairly quickly, it seems quickly, but probably took me 2 years just to realize this, that like open science is not just an equitable science. And it's interesting because now I'm like, of course, duh, but it just takes a while to unlearn those concepts. Like science is not this objective thing that you can just, I thought that what it was. Like science was sold to me as this, there's only one truth and you have to pursue that truth. And it's an equation, like you'll get there if you just do the things right. It's not that, right? And so I'm 40 now, but I think even in the context of open science, when we're talking about change, still there is so much, it's so easy to just fall back on the processes of of oppression, because really we breathe the air, and it's not just about feeling guilty. We just need to move on and kind of figure out where can we kind of chip at it. And so even in open science, that doesn't automatically erase systemic oppressions. We already had some questions about like, do we truly mean everybody? And I think the answer is no, at the moment, at least. And so when I talk about oppression and systems of oppression, I just want to give a definition. There are many, but just talking about discriminatory institutions, structures, norms, and policies and practices that are embedded in our society, in our processes, in our institutions, and oppressed groups of people. There are many different kinds of oppressions. They all are they have roots that touch each other, and they are connected. And it feels overwhelming by how much there is, but that I try not to let that overwhelm come in the way of discovering how we can chip at it. And truly, like, just to connect it back to open science, these three people and many others, but I really, my mind always goes back to this Dr. Angelo Kuhne, Dr. Leslie Chan, and Dr. Denise Albornoz, are the people that really put that seed in my mind that kept growing into like how important it is to not just say, okay, we open up science, we give access to everyone, and that's it. This project, the Open and Collaborative Science and Development Network, it's right now has been a sunsetted project, but it brought so much to I think this community. And what they did is that they challenged the fact that open science is, particularly in the policymaking institutional space, is a technology that, I guess, like if we need to pursue openness because it will enable to be more productive, it will enable us to be more efficient, and it will generate more competitive science. So they question this utilitarian concept of science that incentivizes knowledge knowledge production for the sake of innovation and international competitiveness, which works really well in some spaces. Like, open science, it makes it very easy for kind of everyone to accept that that's what it is. But in truth, that's not really what, open science. There is another aspect of research, which is attending to social challenges and equipping citizens to access their fundamental rights, amongst many others. And so what they did is that they engaged with practitioners and activists from 26 countries in Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East and Asia to understand what are the values at the core of open science and development. How does open science work for you, and some of these practices, would they truly enable you to do your work better? And I'm not going to go into details. You can look at the result, all the projects, but really, like, there was discovered that even just the concept of research is felt with a lot of suspicions, because even research and science, as I mentioned before, it didn't just like evolve around oppression, but it really helped legitimize some forms of knowledge extraction and some forms of oppression. So there is a lot of suspicion in many different communities, for good reasons, about what even science does. And so just opening it up, that doesn't really bring a lot of trust without additional context. And again, I'm like going very fast over this, but the concept that stick with me after from this project is also this idea of like situated openness and situated open science, but really like the idea that we can't have great discoveries, but it was for me to think about, like, it is open science, and just as everything, we have a plurality of solutions, a plurality of ideas that have to be adaptable to different communities, have to be contextualized, and they have to be contextualized by those communities, not by us telling us talking to me or like any other entity telling people what they should be or should be not doing. And so that was, to me, like a very transformational kind of mindset that I try to apply in everything that we do. And then, the other part was this idea of equity. So I think that after learning from them and many others, people in the space, I really kind of quickly was like, equity is a value and as a practice has to come along with open. There's no openness that can come without really striving for equity. And then we can talk more about what equity means. But interestingly, like, I think that there are many skeptics around, and I think for good reason. This is a recent piece I think it was a personal take on science, not just open, but this really like science is not built for equity. And institutions focus only on improved access and optics. This is a quote from Dr. Dolores Armentaras, who said, like, basically, I try to engage, but there is really no easy way to plug in equity because the systems just are not designed for that. And it's true. So equity, I think, even more so than openness as a value, really need a lot of active, intentional work. And even then, we might not get it right. And I hope that by the end of this talk, we can agree that shouldn't stop us from pursuing it. So why, this is kind of back to the original questions, like why focusing on preprint? I'm not going to talk too much about preprints because you all have done it, but peer review in general should be the thing that I do and my team does, if these are really the values, to try to hold that change, to hold that transformation around the world, to get to that kind of beautiful space in which where everybody is free from oppression. And I think that in addition to the fact that oppression is everywhere, is also the fact that peer review has quite a lot of features that we can tackle in terms of like trying to change and bring more equity to the space. And just the definition, there was already a question about like who is qualified? How do you know that those people are qualified to review? The very definition of peer review, and again, there are many definitions. This is a Wikipedia one. It is qualified members of a profession that come and kind of provide that feedback and the knowledge to evaluate a research manuscript or any kind of, I mean, this is like peer review from an article perspective, but who decides who is qualified and who is not? What does qualified even means? Like when we think about experts, what are the qualities of an expert? And I think that if we start asking those questions and answer them honestly, we'll find a lot of flaws into our reasoning, because there is a lot of proximity or proxies for expertise that have a lot more to do with how much prestige there is behind the institution, where that researcher may be, the many years, who they are, how known they are, and less association with an actual contribution to research and knowledge, specifically in a constructive way. And anyway, other aspects of peer review are like it's commonly very opaque. You don't know who the people are. It's kind of depicted as a black box. And it is also depicted in these cartoons as a kind of a fairly scary activity to go through, where, you know, a death is literally at the end of it. You know, it's not a fun concept. I don't remember really ever thinking about being reviewed and being like, yay, I'm excited to get some constructive feedback, improve my research. So I really think that there is a lot to do to improve peer review. And amongst those things, increases the amount of the diversity of voices that are included. And so I have a couple of slides here. There's not much data that we can really look at around like the identity of peer reviewers, because peer review is operating behind closed doors in most cases. This is a little bit dated now, but it is a study that looked at, they're called gatekeepers. They included senior editors, reviewing editors, and peer reviewers for a total of 8,000. They reviewed at eLife between 2012 and 2017. So eLife made this data available. And what they found is that, again, probably not surprisingly, 75% of these gatekeepers, and most of them were peer reviewers, were men. And 60% of these gatekeepers were from North America, 32% from Europe, and then very small percentages from the rest of the world. So that obviously does not represent the diversity of researchers that actually put out their work. And do produce knowledge around the world. And so then also these experts that we're talking about are definitely not early career researchers. And it's interesting because we also can think about who are early career researchers in different ways. In this particular one, we were talking about postdoctoral researchers. So to me, you know, questionable if they're still early in their career, but they are experts, right, in what they're doing. And still, many of them had never done peer review. So they have never been asked by an editor to review, even though they have expertise. The way that they have done some peer review was when they asked, have you done it together with your boss, with your PI. And so this is referred in this article as ghostwriting. So there is opportunity. I've been in that situation when my boss asked me to review something with him, and very often those reviews are not recognized. So there is some engagement in peer review, but it's not seen, and also there is no real training for doing it. So these are just, again, some other things that we see in peer review, and I'm like, I think we have a lot of opportunities here to make a change. And the last point here, not of the presentation, but of this, actually, this is not the last point, but an homogeneous group of gatekeepers also leads to unequal publishing. And this is not the only reason why there is unequal publishing, but this is a map that I think really conveys a lot of information in there, which is the output of research is really skewed to the north. And so you can see that there is like a huge representation of North America. And Europe, the UK is very big. You can even tell that that's the UK. And I think China is the red. And then everything else in the south is like so skinny, even though in terms of how big the region is, that I feel definitely that's not the actual geographical representation. And this is actually, I think, one of the last points that I have issues that I have with peer review is that if you actually look at, someone talked about how, well, we did say like preprints, careful, they're not reviewed. But a lot of articles that are reviewed are also either not reviewed very well, or, then the people that reviewed it, they were not truly experts, or they also, in addition to that, might have provided reviews that are incredibly harmful. And so this is another opinion. Unfortunately, it's behind the paywall, but that recently came out just as another story, one of many stories that I've read in the few years about people receiving really unprofessional, I would say like harassing, comments in peer review. And there is a whole study that looked at these comments that come out through journal organized peer review. And again, this is not uncommon. These are some of the most, I think, horrible ones, but I've heard that many times. And so when you have something behind the closed box or behind the closed doors, and when you have a process that it really doesn't incentivize constructiveness and care, you do end up with some of this. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen when you open up peer review to anyone. That can happen, but at least you can moderate and kind of monitor the situation. So I know that I don't have much time. I have a couple of minutes left. I just want to say that a couple of words about pre-review. What we're trying to do here, so with is opening up the process of peer review using preprints. But the future that we really want to see is this future in which knowledge can flow freely and equitably, and there are no barriers to participation. I know it sounds like it's maybe far away, but we want to strive for that future in which scholarly ecosystems is truly rooted in care. And we question about what does care mean in these processes. We do this through a different kind of programs. We have platforms in which anyone with an ORCID identifier, so you do need an ORCID, but you can get an ORCID with any email, can review preprints publicly. Or they can do it via a pseudonym. There is a lot of different features, and I'm not going to talk about any of them, but there are slides at the bottom of the deck if you want to look at some of the things that we do. We think that training is very important, not just because of the training of how you do it, but also as an opportunity for people to discuss some of these issues, like for reflection that actually leads to a lot of emergence learning and unlearning. And then organize calls like this to review together, which I think it's much more fun than reviewing alone. I also want to leave with a couple of just reflections. One is that, again, going back to amazing Denise Albornoz and these things about what did open science really gave me and other people, is this idea of questioning constantly, but what is knowledge? Who produces the knowledge? Who is an expert? And I kind of asking those questions over and over to really see that the answers that we give are rooted in beliefs that we need to kind of start shifting away from those old beliefs and rooted in oppression. truly the last thing. I want to give it a shout out for reimagining research from the group Pause and Effect, and there is a link that I can also put in the chat. And it's a 5-week program where they really challenge like people to think about what research is, and that doesn't give it. It's you should truly check it out. But one of the activities they had on week 1 was like, as if you have to use a metaphor that best describes your relationship with research, what would that look like? And I love that exercise because it really kind of unlocked my mind. And the first image, and I couldn't find exactly what it was in my mind, that research gave me through was this image of like, you know, a lot of machines and caterpillars and that are just like tearing down forest and just like completely just like leveling it up. And so there's this idea, a little bit of devastation that came into my mind in that moment. But then the second image that came about was also this beautiful field of flowers, specifically dandelions, has this image of like resistance, this image of like we have a way, those roots of the dandelions are going to be in the soil. And if we allow it to come back, if we get rid of some of those bulldozers, we can actually truly go back to a flourishing space in which knowledge just flows from one seed to and one field to the other. So I want to leave it with that image, and also invite you to think about what is your blue sky, what is that image of the world that you really want to pursue and help build. And even if it feels overwhelming, anything that you can contribute is important. So small is all, this concept that we as individual can actually make a true difference towards that future. And thank you for enduring 3 more minutes that I was allowed to. And this is my team and wonderful people, but truly the community. I can't fit it into a slide, and it's what makes pre-review worth continuing doing. And I invite you all to reach out, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Daniela, for that talk. So we do have quite a couple of questions. Maybe we'll start from the chat. So from Albrecht, he asks, do you think that open access can build better bridges between science/scholarship and the public, which often feels excluded and is suspicious of research?
100%. I think it can. And in fact, I love that question. And so thank you for bringing it back to that, to the idea of the public. I think it can, but there is just making, for example, in pre-review, I said anyone with an ORCID ID can review preprints. Does that mean that we build it and then they'll come? No, because the public and all of those communities that have been told that they don't know enough, they're not just gonna like, hey, hello. I mean, researchers don't do that. Like, I can now provide feedback. We need to do so much work to build that trust. That their knowledge won't be exploited, that their knowledge will be valued and truly honored. So one of the things that we've been very excited, and it's not really taking off. We also have a small team, but like we have been doing a small pilot with patients and patient-driven organizations. I believe that as a researcher, as I used to be a researcher, the value that I would have had to actually have the people, but not just like to, hey, tell me about but drive my question. Like there is no point in me coming up from an outside community with the questions. I can bring the knowledge of the research maybe, but really the knowledge of the lived experiences. I feel like there's so much room for improvement in how much actually we don't center, we actually devalue that knowledge. So I think that open access and open science can do a lot, but we need to go beyond that, it's available, anyone can join, because that won't. There are barriers that are beyond just a click, beyond even just access to the internet, right? But that's so there is a lot of work. So yes, but we need to intentionally focus on also those barriers of engagement that are beyond, again, the technical one.
Okay, let's go to the Q&A box. I believe from Shemuel. We have another question for you, Daniela. For collaborative science, does it include collaboration between academy and community?
Yeah.
So
right. I think it's similar, perhaps. maybe if I get it right. But I think that the collaboration and co-creation, which is a step ahead of collaboration, should happen between communities and the science that relates to those communities, and needs to. I didn't have it because I was like already had too many slides, but I often bring in some examples of recently published research that is so harmful for the communities, like suggesting things like gene editing to solve suicide in indigenous communities. So like gene editing in children, so that we no mention about the harm, like, and even like, that kind of extractive, completely even wrong scientifically kind of research is still pervasive. And it would have not happened if we truly had a relationship, right? A reciprocal relationship with the communities that we are trying to help. They might not even want that. There's so much more that we can do to prevent suicide in indigenous communities than like looking at genes in children. Like, it is truly appalling. And that is peer-reviewed research, government funded, that is out there. And so, yes, so I get very excited about, animated, not excited about those things, but yeah. And I can also make one thing in the chat if we need to move on. So let me know.
Maybe just one more if you would like from the Q&A. So preprints have radically changed the idea of peer review, and it could do more. Do you think traditional journals will learn from open preprint reviews to truly transform the status quo of the traditional peer review model?
Yeah, I don't think that like a preprint and preprint peer review should just like immediately can cancel other models. So first, again, there needs to be a plurality. So as long as there is a shared core values of what we want to do, and truly, if you're talking about a journal that's like completely just prioritize the commercialization and profit, then maybe it's going to be hard to see that future. But in terms of like, I do see the community peer review has a place and to aid actually like a journal organized peer review. We have a couple of collaborations going on right now that actually merge the community review, preprint review with the journal process. So there is still a lot that journals can do in terms of curation and truly building that trust with the community. And I think that, so there is a future. It's just, technology can support it. We have that technology, but oftentimes it's not the technology alone. It's about like that mindset of like, how do I trust that this person that I've never heard can do a good review? Well, you read the reviews and then you can, you start judging it yourself if they're helpful or not. And of course, this is simplistic, but yes, I think that we are very much, in fact, collaborate also with platforms such as Preprint.org to really bring collaborative community peer review to existing processes.
Great. Thank you so much. So I think now it's time to move on. And so we'll go to Jonny's presentation. If you would like to take over and share your screen.
Okay. So I guess I'm actually going to talk about quite a few of the things that have come up in questions or in the chat already. In addition to AI, which surprisingly has not yet come up. I've just started my own organization, and I've just added this slide in a few minutes ago because I figured it was relevant. But what I aim to do is focus on these three areas. So the culture in academia, and that is everything from how we assess researchers and research right through to bullying and all the bad practices that happen, and equity. Trust in research, which has very much come up already a fair few times. And this is not just, do the public trust us as scientists, but how do we as scientists make sure our work is trustworthy? So this is a part of that is peer review. Part of it is looking beyond peer review to additional different indicators. And then also scientific publishing. And my route into changing academic culture and improving trust in research is through changing the publishing system. And so this is where preprints come in, and this is why I love preprints so much, and I seem to never stop talking about them. If we change that, that's the linchpin to then opening up a better academic culture and potentially improving trust in research. Just to give you the wider numbers, preprints now in the life sciences represent about 1 million. This is roughly 11% of the life science literature depending on what you use for your numbers. And you can see this is just growing year on year. This is just broken down by different preprint servers. And then this is on the bottom is your monthly number. We've only just passed 1 million in the life sciences, so big achievement like a month, I think, ago or so. It is very field dependent though, and this answers one of the questions in the Q&A. What we found in the life sciences is that certain fields have adopted much more readily. This is limited, restricted data because it's what is available. But generally, fields like neuroscience, microbiology, bioinformatics have adapted pretty quickly to posting and using preprints. Other fields, so you can see zoology, paleontology right at the bottom here, they've adopted preprints to a much lower level, if at all, in some cases, really. So if we're talking about plant biology is sort of somewhere down here. I would say it's doing average for the life sciences. And thanks to Daniela sharing wonderful data, we can also look at this broken down by preprint reviews. So this is pre-reviews data, and you can see again the reviews actually break down quite surprisingly by field. Molecular biology is one of the better performing fields for depositing preprints. It's still sort of somewhere in the average. So actually kind of surprising to see it quite as big, but I don't know if that's just because biochemistry, genetics, and molecular biology. And then other ones you can see neuroscience relatively high up, not as high as you would expect given it's the biggest in the life sciences for as a field. But there's a big disparity across disciplines. There's also a very big disparity of preprint adoption by region and also by career stage. And currently, if you try to get a number on this, it's a bit hard to do, but roughly 2% of preprints are reviewed each year. That is increasing. This is data still needs to be finished off for 2024, I think. But this is slow. It is going up a little bit. Big boost here through the COVID pandemic. And it's nice to see that this is going up. And one of the really nice things about this is that when we're talking about who owns our knowledge, peer review is, as Daniela showed, currently a gatekeeping function. I think I get a bit of a reputation for hating peer review, and I don't. But what I do is I don't like that peer review is that gatekeeping function. I think it should be this great thing that helps authors make their work better. So what I subscribe to, and I'm going to use different names that some people might be aware of here, but I believe we should have this kind of model in the future. So this is where we publish, and by publish, I mean you post a preprint. And then we've got this layer of integrity and trust signals on top of it. Integrity is getting back to that researcher side of things. So these are the things that we, as people doing the work, can do to make sure our work is trustworthy. And then the trust signals here are things like peer review. These are external things that help a reader know whether or not they can trust the work. And then we have to bundle in assessment with that. We can't talk about who owns our knowledge without also talking about who owns our assessment. And this is the really big problem at the moment, is that the traditional publishers are owned by companies that own the entire research lifecycle. So they own what you find, they own what you publish, and they own how you are assessed as a researcher. And as long as those are all bundled up into one thing, we're going to really struggle to get out of that and make knowledge equitable and fair. And of course, this should be all owned and led by scholars. This is not an argument about profit or not profit. This is about who is setting the rules. So who has a voice in this? Preprints are really great at giving authors a bigger voice. I like to refer to them as the director's cut. Like when a director is making a movie, it's your version of your work. Not always a great thing. Sometimes some of us are a little bit hyperbolic in what we say, but we're excited about our work. But that's where things like peer review and other trust indicators can come in to reduce that a little bit. Preprint peer review really does have a huge role in increasing equity in the voices involved. Peer review are the ones I always say are leading the effort on this one. They're probably the only one in the space really dedicated to that. So yay, Daniela. And it means I get talked about them all the time, which is quite nice. Both of these things allow for different and more community-oriented governance models. they allow experimentation. And that's where we need to be a little bit careful with how we're describing these things, because there's lots of benefits to preprints, but the biggest benefit is that actually they've got potential. They've got a potential to change. And whether we realize that or not is up to us as researchers and people using them or not using them. And this is why I think the model I just showed is really important to adopt. You may have seen it talked about as the publish, review, curate model. I have some issues with PRC, but that's not for this talk. But it's really important that whatever we do is varied, as Daniela was saying, that we take a lot of different approaches and that we learn from each approach. Because what we don't need to do is do a million different things and then just not even bother trying to learn from them. So there's a lot of different preprint review services now, and this is kind of what the current system looks like. So you have here at the bottom your preprint servers. So if we were building this up with services, so you've got a bunch of different preprint servers, and you can pick whichever one you want depending on what it is you want out of those. So someone was talking about trying to compete on the global open science stage. That's where things like Africa Archive can come in really great because that's very regional specific. Sciolo is the same. There are also quite narrow field specific preprint servers, which again can help you stand out. So this is where probably there needs to be a bit more training around how to choose a preprint server. And then on top of these, you have this feedback ecosystem. There are currently about 20 active platforms reviewing preprints. I don't think I missed any when I was making that list, but it's me, so I may very well have done. And these range from very minimal sort of, it's a comment, right up to what you would get in a journal. And that's great because, like I said, this is a really great experimental approach. We can do lots of different things. And then on top of that, we have this sort of linking and discovery layer. And the one to really call out here is Europe PMC, who are doing a fantastic job of integrating preprints into their entire ecosystem. There's some really cool stuff coming out of there soon. So keep your eyes out for that one. If you do want a list of the preprint review services, comparing them all for a bunch of different things, you can go to that link and you can find it. This is all 20. These are just the ones focused on life sciences or with a life science component. So it's not everything. So what about AI and peer review? If we're talking about who owns knowledge, this is difficult territory at the moment, given the current situation going on with AI. I think one of the things we do need to acknowledge is that AI is being used in peer review. These are just some examples to prove that point. We can't get away from that now. It's gone. It's happening. We can't really stop it. It's also maybe worth highlighting that AI and these large language models are improving at an alarming rate. They are getting better every year. There is a big group of people who think we are going to have a situation where AI is doing a lot of the peer reviewing, and people have various thoughts about that. But there are a lot of concerns around this. They are still producing a lot of hallucinations and just absolute nonsense. The lack of human oversight is quite concerning. Especially, I've not gone into it in this talk, but one of the really big problems with AI, if I would say it's the biggest problem, is that they're just not equitable. There was a study, I think 2 weeks ago, and it was showing that AI will prioritize institutional affiliation and those kind of prestige markers. And so for me, when we talk about science, that actually is way worse than hallucinations, because at least you can check those and kind of get rid of them. There is a general lack of in-depth understanding of how these products actually work, but also in how they do their analysis. And there is a gaming of LLMs. So you would have probably all seen this. It got a lot of attention, but this was an example where people were posting preprints with white text, basically giving AI prompts to give them a nice review. I would love if we could do that to all human authors as well. Just sneak them a bit of chocolate or something as give me a nice review. There are a range of AI tools, and this is also growing. There's a lot of those now. They all do slightly different things. They all take slightly different approaches. What I would like to see is a lot of this used alongside the human aspect of this. So there's things AI can do really well that we should probably use it for, but I'm not convinced we should ever use it without that human oversight. And there's a bunch of different ways it is being used. So it's being used to help identify potential reviewers. Coming back to that part about equity and bias, that is something that absolutely needs oversight at the moment. It's being used for various different automated checks on your manuscripts. This is one of those things it probably does quite well. It can be used to summarize peer review reports. I think this is one thing where when we're talking about peer review and equity, one of the things we don't often talk about is, and it's come up today though, is how accessible that is. Because you can make something open, but if people don't understand it or if people have to dig for information and data, it's not very accessible, and you could argue you haven't actually made it that open. So by summarizing peer review reports, that could be a really good step towards highlighting that extra bit of content on a given output. This can be used to improve grammar and language. I think that's one of the few use cases where people seem to be very happy with AI use. But it is also being used to write full peer review reports. Sometimes that's with human oversight, sometimes it's not. There is a conference coming up that I saw advertised today where the conference is full of AI written papers that have been reviewed by AI. I don't know if it's going to be people attending that conference, who knows? But that I saw that advertised today. So this is something that people are experimenting with. There are also some review services where, at least the ones I've looked at, there's definite AI use without human oversight. So we do need to be careful with that. And that's where these best practices come in. So this is something I've been trying to do for ages, and I just now have the time to do it, so I did it. This is a set of best practices actually for preprint review services, although I am working on one for reviewers and preprint authors. And it follows the same kind of principles. So I've come up with what I think are 5 relatively sensible guiding principles. First is transparency. So as Daniela was talking about when we were talking about the problems with peer review, we don't actually know all of the problems with peer review. We can't get data on it because it's not transparent. So transparency is sort of a key first step. Human oversight, security and confidentiality. That becomes a lot more important if we're talking about manuscripts that are not pre-printed. Quality and integrity, and then ethical and unbiased review. And then I've also got various few, I think 5, ways of implementing these best practices. So I think what we should see, what I would love to see more of, are specific AI policies. And yet another shout out to Daniela. Pre-review have one. Not a lot of the review services have one at the moment. Not a lot of journals have one at the moment. Not a lot of preprint servers have one at the moment. So because there's a lack of policy, because there's lack of transparency, it is making the situation a lot more complicated and confusing than it needs to be. I think guidance is really, really important. Daniela was talking about the importance of training with peer reviewers. I think we are going to see more AI use, so I think it's really important we start to train people in using it responsibly. So this is things like sticking to some of these best practices and guidelines, but really talking about the importance of that human oversight and where these biases creep in, because not all the LLMs you use have been built on the same data sets. I think it's really important we capture AI use. Again, transparency. It's super important that we know it's being used and how it's being used, so that if it's being used badly, we can correct and introduce things that shift people away from doing that. But equally, if it's being used in a really good, positive way, by highlighting that, we're helping to normalize the use of a new tool. And that's ultimately what this is. This is one way I think review services and actually journals could implement this, is by actually just having a box where you say, yes, I've used it, this is how I've used it, and everyone's happy. We really do need to encourage people to take responsibility. If we're talking about who owns our knowledge, the output of an LLM might not be human generated, but we do need to take ownership over that. And then also to audit AI tools. So we need to make sure that if we're suggesting the use of these things, we understand how they're used, how they're built. This is where we really come in with the biases and understanding what that data set is, what that data set means, and how to either combat that a little bit to make things more equal and fair, or that actually we can't use this because it's so horribly unfair, it shouldn't be used. So just to come back to the question of who has a voice, I think it's really important we ensure that certainly in reviewing activities, humans have a voice. I would also say in writing activities, it's really important humans have a voice. I don't know about anyone else, but when I write, that's usually when I do some of my better thinking. Also often a little bit too late in the process, but I think it's really important that when we're doing these kind of guidelines and we're saying this is what you should do, we do that collaboratively. So this was done, I sent this out to all of the preprint review service. And when I do the ones aimed at authors, I will send that out and get feedback on it. And this is part of a broader series. And just going back to rippling ideas, this really is about embedding all these things sort of as our foundation. So we're very, very focused on community. We are very focused on preprints because I think they are the way forward. It's about having a very people-first approach to ensure that everyone has a voice. And that's not me representing your voice, that's me making sure you're there with your own voice at these things. And it's also about being expertise and evidence-led. I think one of the big things we're seeing, I don't know if I was just being a bit pessimistic in my response to the earlier question, but I think we are seeing a bit of a retraction in the open science space towards America and the EU. And I would like to see that stop and go back to being global. I'll drop all these links in the chat, but otherwise that's me done.
Great, thank you so much. So now we open the floor to some questions. There's quite a lot of activity in the chat, so let me scroll up. Okay, we have a question for either Daniela or Jonny, whoever wants to respond to this one. So open science initiatives in neuroscience. Oh, I think you answered this in the chat already, Daniela.
Yeah, but
Maybe.
maybe yeah.
Maybe Jonny can give his opinion then. So open science initiatives in neuroscience relative to other subjects and fields, and in Latin America relative to other geographical regions. Portuguese and Spanish, featuring in one of Jonny's slide, is an example. They seem to be disproportionately higher. Do you think these have been recognized enough and have been researched well to be applied in other fields, regions?
I've not got a huge amount to add to Daniela's response, actually, but I would say in terms of being recognized enough, there's a really interesting thing happening in some fields like neuroscience. Cell biology is another one, where your average researcher thinks it's mission accomplished and everyone preprints because everyone they know preprints, even though preprints, they're still about 11% of the total literature. So some fields actually have adopted them well enough that there's this notion that it's not really an issue to advocate for anymore and everyone else is doing it. And that is a new challenge in trying to advance preprints. The other thing that question brings up is a really interesting aspect to open science more broadly, which is open science has a very, very, very strong focus on particularly actually US-based efforts. Open access goes back 30 years, US, Western Europe kind of effort. And actually, if you broaden out a little bit, the Global South is amazing at things like diamond open access. And there's so much we could learn from that, and we're not. And this is what I was trying to get at when I was saying we really need voices at the table, because there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and I don't think we are learning them at the moment. And I don't know why there is such a pulling back from doing that. But hopefully, maybe that will change.
And maybe from the chat, from Nahum, we have a question. So given the significant benefits I have personally experienced from the open access model, how should a researcher navigate the subsequent confusion and predatory requests, often involving demands for processing and review fees that frequently arise after publishing a preprint? And what measures can the academic community or preprint servers implement to better vet unsolicited journal invitations?
So this
So-
came up actually. Richard Sever answered a very similar question recently on social media. Preprint servers can't really do much because the reason you're getting these is that your email is public. So you do get some of this when you publish a paper, but I think there's less of that predatory nature because there's obviously a lot of things people can charge you for at the pre-printing stage. So the best thing to do is if people are trying to charge you for anything to do with a preprint, I would generally just ignore it. It's probably predatory. You can be fairly confident it is. We have this problem now on the podcast actually, because when we started, we were the only ones doing it, and we're free. We don't charge anyone. But now what we're finding is there are some other podcasts that, to be honest, mostly AI generated, and someone posts a preprint and they'll say, "Come on and let us do it, and we'll charge you this small little fee." So we're finding it harder to find people who think we're real. But I'm here. We are real. But I do think it's challenging. Daniela?
Yeah, if I may add, I mean, this is happening for everything. It's happening for, webinars like this one. We recently started getting like Webinar TV. Apparently it's a legit company that can record the whole webinar, it's not a problem when it's already public, but when it is. So I think that these things are just going to increase, and that's why we really need to invest on that trust building and community building. To add to, like, we actually got some critics about the fact that we don't contact the authors of the reviews when the reviews are published. But we don't do that because even though we might have we're able to harvest the metadata, right? Like, it's not because of lack of technical expertise, but like, we don't want to email an author just because the email is available without their consent of being. So I think we're building very slowly ways of notified people that have ask for reviews, but even in that case, it has to be very explicit consent. So I'm generally like against people that just like harvest. But then on the other side, they were like, but if there is a review of my paper, I wish that you told me. And so it's really hard to navigate. But I think in general, if someone is charging you, asking for money, like, just ignore it. And then just like look for those trust signal, find your tribe, find your community, and trying to learn from what they offer. But it is very difficult. There is no one answer to this question.
The other thing you can do is join things like pre-reviews Slack, because if you ask in there, someone will tell you this is a predatory thing or not.
I should pay you for all of this advertising.
Somebody should.
We are free, we're no profit. But anyway, yeah, I'll put the Slack link there. Thanks, Jonny.
Okay, so I think we can move on to our final presentation of the day. So Lamis, we give the floor to you if you would like to share your screen.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the previous speakers. I think they've made my talk already so much easier. So let me share my screen. Thank you so much. And thank you to preprints.org for this webinar and this opportunity. I've been looking at everyone who has joined and the different nationalities, and it's always amazing to have people from all over the world joining into these conversations. I'll be talking about preprints and open science in general, and how they can act as a really strong voice for Africa and African research, and how they could amplify the visibility and inclusion of African research and African scholars. So I'm Lamis Elkheir. I'm the Director of Training and Research and Resource Development at AREN. I'm also an ASAP Bio Fellow and a peer-review champion, and also a lecturer at the University of Khartoum in Sudan. So I think before we could answer the question who has a voice in open science, we need to see who have a voice in global science and global publishing in general. So if you want to look at the African voice, and we dive into the UNESCO Science Report of 2021, it was the latest report released by UNESCO, and we could find that actually, despite Africa constituting almost 18% of the global population, but less than 3% of global research output are from Africa, which is very sad. And then even within these 3%, you can see that there are certain countries that are dominating these research outputs, for example, South Africa and Nigeria. And some countries, like you could find less than 10 papers per million people. So within Africa, there are a lot of inequalities between African scholars themselves. And also, we can find that more than 80% of these publications actually involve foreign co-authors. And this could be viewed as good, but then there's an issue of the fact that this means that the visibility of these scientific findings are mainly mediated via external partnership, and not through regional system, not through robust regional system that advocate for African-produced science. And also, this greatly limits the ownership of data. And this is actually a big issue because at AREN we've been interacting with a lot of African scholars, and we've been talking about all aspects of open science, and open data always seems to, be a bit sensitive, because African scholars have been through a lot of, troubles with their data being stolen, and nothing they could do about it. So really having control and ownership over data is something very important when it comes to African scholars. So what this picture paints that there is a severe visibility gap when it comes to African research. But then the question is, can open science really enhance the visibility of African scholarship? And the answer is yes. Actually, open science can be transformative when it comes to visibility of African research, and it transforms it from, being isolated and undervisible to being connected, accessible, and globally impactful. And it does so by various means. One of the means is that it expands the access and visibility of the research. So open science offers a lot of tools that can do so. For example, we have open access, we have preprints, we have open repositories, and all of these remove the paywalls and the APCs that have been really exhausting African scholars, and really making one of the biggest limitations and barriers for African scholars to share their research and to see global research. The other thing that open science helps with is that it reduces the dependencies on gatekeepers. And Daniela have given a wonderful explanation of gatekeepers and what gatekeepers do. And through history, unfortunately, gatekeepers have been biased towards African scholarly output. They from the get-go, they think of African scholarly outputs as inferior and of less quality. And this has been really affecting the visibility of African research. It's you usually expect a rejection, when you submit for a journal, unfortunately, due to gatekeepers. But then, open science is really working hard to eliminate these gatekeeping, to allow African scholars to have a more prominent voice in the scientific community. Also, open science strengthens collaboration and capacity. Having the data open, the methods open, and everything open, this, enhances collaboration and enhances, access to information that in turn will help African scholars to produce more up-to-date research and more relevant research to what's happening globally. And I think it's important to focus. While I think in Africa, because we depend so much on external visibility, it's very important that we think of intra-African collaborations and how we can make these stronger and use this collaboration to advocate more for African scholarly publications. And finally, I think this is the most important aspect of open science, is that it builds equity and it builds trust. And this is something that has been quite imbalanced in the past decades in the scientific community. So making everything transparent, of course, will promote integrity and credibility. And it will support inclusive participations by researchers across languages and regions, and it will definitely eliminate many of the issues such as helicopter science, and many of the practices that have been happening in Africa and that basically give attribution to the work to people who probably did not do that work. So now moving from open science to preprints, because judging from the different interactions that we have at AREN with the African scholarly communities, preprint seems to be one of the less widely known concepts of open science. For most African scholars, if you say open science, they automatically associate it with open access. So it's really important to educate African scholars, know there are many other aspects to open science, and preprints being one of them. And for African scholars, preprints have so many major or important advantages. Of course, the first one is the faster dissemination of scientific findings. You don't really have to wait for years or months for a gatekeeper to basically deem your research worthy of publication. You can instantly share your work with the world. And the other thing is that it's free. You don't need to pay APCs, and APCs are really a big issue for African scholars, because most of the cases they have to pay these APCs from their own salaries, and they're already doing the research from their own salaries, which is already very small. So this adds a huge burden on their backs. And finally, the previous speakers, Jonny and Daniela, and all the speakers talked about how preprints enhance visibility, and this is something that we desperately need in Africa. We need more visibility, we need more citations, and of course, this will bring in more collaboration and more acknowledgement to African research. Yet, if we take a look into the preprint adoption in Africa versus the whole world, you can see from this paper at eLive that it's in 2020. I'm not aware if there is a more updated version, but I wouldn't think that there has been a significant change. But you can easily see that, in Africa, the adoption is very low. Some countries have more adoptions compared to others. South Africa, for example, have very good adoption, but then there are other countries that you don't see any adoption of preprints. So there is quite a big gap in Africa when it comes to adoption of preprints. So I think we could conclude that there is increasing adoption and growing adoption of preprints among African scholars, but it still remains significantly lower compared to global counterparts. And in the next few slides, I'm going to present some of the work that I've been doing with ASAP Bio during my fellowship, and some of the results that we got from the various activities that we did with ASAP Bio. So, for example, we published a preprint about the status and challenges of preprint adoption in Africa. And this preprint actually had a survey that was disseminated to 182 African scholars, and only 41.9% of them have posted a preprint before. like already this is a very low number. We know that the African scholars are much, much more, but like even within this small number, we almost more than half of them did not post a preprint before. And then we also did a webinar series called Preprints as a Catalyst for Change in Africa. And during the sign up for the event, we had a brief survey that showed, sorry. And from this survey, we found that 37% of the respondents had no prior knowledge about preprints. They have no clue what a preprint is. They have never read, 39% of them have never read a preprint before, and 67.8% of them have never authored a preprint before. So these are really alarming percentages and alarming numbers, but it does show the truth or the reality of what's happening in Africa when it comes to preprints. Then we also did a workshop that tried to gather views and inputs from African-based researchers about the use of preprints and its adoption. And 24% of them said that they are not familiar with preprints. Again, that this goes with what we've seen previously. And 64% of them have never engaged or contributed to a preprint. So again, this is really very alarming stats. Despite that, we can say that the sample size is not that big, but it does show a representation of what's happening in Africa. And also from the research, some of the research that we did, we found that those researchers that do post preprints, they actually mostly use preprint servers that are owned by major publishers, owned and operated by major publishers. And while this is good, but then the issue is that this means that the traditional publishing system is still dominating, and posting a preprint is only a co-option. It's just because you are submitting your paper to a journal, then the journal prompts you to post it as a preprint or post it automatically as a preprint, then you choose that option. And of course, this negates a lot of the benefits that preprinting has. It basically means that you're not utilizing the the different benefits that preprints could give you as an African scholar. So perhaps we could look at some of the reasons that we think are causing this. Of course, the most important reason is the lack of awareness. Most African scholars don't know about preprints and their potential benefits. Many African scholars have been traumatized by scooping. A lot of the research has been scooped, so there's a lot of fear of, if I post it as a preprint, then it's going to be scooped, and I'm going to lose the recognition of being the the main author or producer of this research output. And also the lack of recognition by local publishers and by academics and funding institutions. And when we talk about who have a voice in open science, unfortunately, some voices count more, and the voices of publishers, academic and funding institutions in the current system that we have, they count more. So the lack of recognition for preprints make African researchers, again, afraid to post preprints. And again, there is a cultural and institutional bias towards traditional peer-reviewed journals. They are seen as more prestigious and more reliable. And there has also been a lot of trauma from previous decades of, African scholarly output being less credible and of lower quality. And many African scholars might feel that because preprints are not peer-reviewed, officially peer-reviewed by a journal, it would mean that this work is of lower quality and not credible. And finally, maybe this is an issue, but not as a strong issue as the others that we mentioned, is that most preprint servers are in English, and it might be surprising for some of you to know that in Africa we have more than 3,000 different languages, and we have more than 28 official languages. So actually, some African countries don't really use English. They don't use it in their publication, and hence, if you don't have a platform that supports the use of different languages, then this will in turn lead to lower adoption. But the good news is that currently there are a lot of efforts that are trying to enhance the adoption of preprints in Africa and the adoption of open science in Africa in general. So there are a lot of awareness and training efforts done by ESABio and by AREN. Of course, these are just examples. I'm aware that there are so many other initiatives and organizations that are trying to fill this gap. It's really important to establish local preprint repositories. So Africa Archive is a very good example of that. And I remember seeing in the chat a question about, difficulty in accessing local research outputs. So I think using Africa Archive to post preprints and research that is done in Africa would make it easier for African scholars to find them and build on them. And of course, there are a lot of preprint peer review efforts that are going on. Of course, peer review and ESABI crowd preprint reviews, and the many different other initiatives and organizations that Jonny talked about. But all of these, efforts are collectively trying to fill in this gap and hopefully enhance the adoption of preprints and open science in Africa. And from that, I want to talk a bit about AREN and what we're trying to do and our agenda. So basically, what we're trying to do is to promote open science and reproducible research in Africa. We're doing so by capacity building of grassroots researchers, because unfortunately, for a long time, the grassroots researchers didn't have a voice. They've been excluded from the conversations when it comes to open science in Africa. Most of the conversation has been going between stakeholders, but the grassroots researchers and those who are doing the research have been neglected for quite a big time. And this is why at AREN, these are our target audience. And for you to be able to practice open science, you have to have local support. So what we're trying to do is to establish local reproducibility network. When you have people around you that are practicing open science, you're going to be more encouraged to practice open science. And of course, the ultimate goal is to set a growing continent-wide open science community. And so far, our community spans more than 30 countries across Africa, more than 400 community members, more than 200 African institutions, an organization, and also different disciplines within these community members. And we value each and every member. Some countries we only have one member from, but this member is very valued because this one person is the gateway to the research community, to the local research communities, which are difficult to access if you don't have at least one member, joining the conversation and sparking conversation with their local communities. So in conclusion, I think we can reimagine and dream that, Africa's voice could be enhanced in the global science platform. So despite Africa contributing less than 3% of the global research output, this doesn't mean that the potential and the impact of this 3% is not big and is not great. And open science really offer, the framework and the bridge to bridge the gap in access, equity, and visibility, which is really needed within the African scholarly community. And when it comes to preprints specifically, it really turns the vision of open science into action. It gives African scholars a voice. It gives them direct and immediate global voice. And one other thing is that, collaboration, capacity building, and inclusive infrastructure are key to sustaining this progress. So while we're trying to advocate, we really should be looking at capacity building and also trying to make infrastructures more available to African scholars who don't really have access to these infrastructures. And finally, I would like to finish up with some actionable next steps. We need to really work in institutional and cultural shifts towards open science, because unfortunately, until now, these hold the keys to the careers of African scholars. So we really need to work hard into shifting their views more towards open science. We really need to address barriers such as lack of awareness, recognition, and technical infrastructure. And of course, we have to advocate, and train African scholars on the benefit and the different aspects of open science. And finally, when knowledge is open, then every researcher everywhere will have a voice in open science. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Lamis, for this inspiring talk. Really, really enjoyed it. So let's open the floor to questions, either in the chat or in the Q&A box. Any questions?
Can I ask one?
Yes, Jonny, go ahead.
So more of a prompt, really. One of the earlier questions in the chat was around training programs for all of this stuff. So maybe Lamis might want to speak to all the brilliant work she does on that.
Thank you, Jonny. It's actually it's not my work. It's the work of the open science community. At AREN, we have amazing collaborators that have helped us and believed in us from the get-go, despite us, being still in our infancy stage. But really, it shows that the open science community is really collaborative and is really aware of the need of training and advocacy. And yeah, we are trying to do different efforts to help in capacity building when it comes to open science in Africa. Thank you, Jonny.
Is there something other platforms could be doing more? For example, preprints.org. If we provided more training, but online trainings, would the accessibility be enough? I know that could be an issue. Do the trainings have to be more local, or does language play a role, or or can anyone participate and help in the trainings?
I think like the help of everyone and anyone is appreciated and needed. Of course, it would be great if a training could be provided in different languages. But even us at AREN, so far, we are mainly doing our training in English. With the help of our community members and our local network leads, we've been translating some of the materials to French and into Arabic. We've also started collaborating with, for example, Fort. They have an open science glossary, and our community member is helping translate it into Swahili. So really, any and every help is appreciated. And I think online sessions are working really good so far. But of course, doing sessions locally would be even more impactful. It will help, the trainees maybe feel a bit more comfortable because they are in a familiar surrounding and with familiar people around them. Sometimes online sessions could feel a bit intimidating for African scholars, but yeah, any and every help is welcomed.
Great. Thank you so much. Maybe I'll move to the poll real quick to see, and then we can end it and move into the roundtable discussions and kind of go from there. So I will share the results with everyone. So I think everyone can see the results. The two most popular questions that we should maybe start off with is how can we encourage the scholarly community to share their results, provide comments, and collaborate more openly? So I think maybe we can start with that one first. So I think there seems to be willingness, but there is, I think, what we have identified, a lack of, people getting involved. So how can we motivate people to participate more in reviewing each other's work, starting conversations, collaborating more, which is what Preprints has always been about, but maybe we're just not there yet with everyone participating. So what can be done?
Can I, so like the thing that, sorry, Lamis, you raise your hand, go ahead.
No, it's okay, it's okay.
You did the
Go
right
ahead,
way.
Daniela.
Go for it. Go for it.
So I think that the best way is, I think, especially talking about African scholars, they really don't know that there is an opportunity. If you don't know that there is an opportunity, then you don't participate. So really trying to raise awareness of the different opportunities that are there will in turn enhance the collaboration and the participation of scholars in the open science movement. Thank you, Daniela.
That's a good practice. Yes, and then not knowing, like, I think when you are, as grassroots project with small team, we are just hiring a communications person. Like it was, communication. We don't have any money in marketing, for example. So like, and I think that the strength of grassroots projects like ours is in that slow and deep relationship building, that it is slow and it is hard to scale. So if someone comes to us and tell us like, how are you going to scale this and go from like these like low thousands to hundreds of thousands, like you gotta give us a lot of money to do that. But really, like even with the money, I think that it is important to maintain that level of like relationship building, because that's our biggest strength against like a giant who wants to come and like try find one solution and kind of paste it over, like copy and paste everything around everything. The other thing I want to say is that I think that one of the reasons why I left academia for this is also because of that feeling of isolation that I was, and this is not true everywhere, but like I think that definitely in the American culture, I feel like this individualistic thing, like you have to show that you're able to do everything. And I was like, this is not why I enter science. I enter science because I want to be collaborative. I want to build on the research of others and continue to advance knowledge. And I think that building a community in which like we can feel more like we're part of something. I feel like a lot of people want to be part of change. So like how do we build these opportunities for people to be part of change, and that will help people come through. And then of course the top down helps, right? When you have funders that say now you have to post a preprint, it's mandatory if you want to continue to receive funding from us, definitely that helps. But that's not like, I really believe that we need to continue to do these grassroots works, and then those like top down will come and incentivize more. And there is a lot of work to do in incentives shifting and things like that. So I'm not saying that that's not important. Jonny.
Yeah, I was just going to bring those two things together, actually. Lamis said the words cultural change in her talk, and that's kind of exactly what needs to happen. And you don't do that without relationship building. And I think the big problem the open science space has, it's going to sound awful, is that it's run by a bunch of ex-scientists. And we're not famed for our communication skills or relationship building skills. And honestly, what we would really benefit from is having a marketing company come in and actually help us market all these things we're talking about, and really reach people we're not currently reaching. I think there's a bit of a discussion at the moment that the space might have plateaued a little bit in terms of who we are reaching. And I think that's partly true because we've kind of exhausted the efforts we've currently been doing. And so things seem to have slowed down a little. But I would love to see a marketing company come in and help us.
Lloyd?
Yeah, I also agree that culture is a big part of that. But apart from that, I think it's also important for all of the product to make it easier for users to involve. Because when we do user research before, the main issue for them, main pain point for them is to enter their article informations again and again on the preprint service, on the journal submitting systems, or even when they need other features, they just need to do it again and again. But if all of us cooperate together and do it more smoothly, maybe like one click to ask for a peer review, this kind of thing, that would make it easier for researchers to join us to do participate in the whole things.
Lamis?
Yeah, I just want to echo on something that Daniela and Jonny mentioned. It's the issue of that most of the open science advocacy efforts are run by volunteers. There is a really big gap in funding for such initiatives. And while, it's good because these volunteers are passionate about open science and they're really trying to make a difference, but then life catches up. They also have responsibility. They also have careers to look out for. So maybe this is why I think at the moment you see that the efforts are kind of plateauing, because these people are just maybe exhausted. I'm talking about myself. I'm really exhausted. And you're facing a lot of, resistance because still open science is trying to force its way through the traditional publishing system. So I think it would be great if funders and could really look out for such initiatives and help them as much as they can so that they could really reach those who really need open science globally. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think bringing up funders and also institutions is quite an important point. There's only so much volunteers can do, as you mentioned, and I think funders have a lot more weight and power. And this is also something Jonny mentioned, who owns assessment. In a way, it is the institutions, for promotion, and funders do own a part of the assessment for you as a researcher. So I think if somehow we would also turn our efforts perhaps towards the funders, maybe that would help out. Is there anything else that we could do also touching upon assessment?
I think Daniela's point about we shouldn't rely on the top down is really, really important, because I think probably the best way to put it is, if you force people to do something, they will do it because you force them to, but you don't get lasting change doing that. And open science isn't just about do this thing, it's about changing how you're thinking about doing things. So one of the really great, I'll give you an example of a friend I've got who started a lab recently. We were driving to climbing the other day and he was complaining to me because one of the really big names in his field has just, he gave a talk, and that this person came up to him and said, oh, well, we've got those results as well. And he was worried he was going to be scooped by this big name. When in reality, what we should be thinking is, that's amazing, I've just got a new collaborator. But because of the way the incentive structure is set up, our immediate thought is, I'm going to be beaten to it, my career is going to be damaged. And I don't think that's what science is. That's also one of the reasons I got out of science. I don't think that is right. But top-down approaches don't fix that. And that's why we need both of those, the grassroots and the top-down together, And it is so important that those grassroots movements are financially supported, and they're definitely under supported at the moment, but also that they keep growing and they keep trying to bring in that as many different voices as possible to reach as many people as possible, because it is one person at a time.
So maybe we transition towards the second most popular question, which has to do with the use of AI and in streamlining submissions, enhancing quality. I think a lot of people don't know yet how to use AI or best practices, and I think we touched upon this in some of the presentations. So what can we say would be an overall take-home message, and what can we integrate? What should we be careful about? And what would be the best use of AI? Maybe in language or translations, or is that a better use of AI?
I think the one thing I would love to see is more use in translations, because it's the one thing I talk to the people at bioRxiv about this every now and then. I would love to see you be able to put your work up in any language and just be able to access it in your own. That would be great to see. But otherwise, I think I've kind of said my bit about AI. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts.
Yes,
Yeah, I
Lamis?
think a big issue that I'm personally facing with the use of AI, for example, I'm not a native speaker. So I try to use AI to help me write better, improve the flow and everything. But then, for example, you have someone who what I wrote is targeted to use AI detectors, and then it says, oh, this is 90% AI. And this is not fair, because you only used AI to enhance the readability of your work because you're not a native speaker, but then you have this being judged as not your own work. So I'd really love to see AI detectors being a bit more advanced in really differentiating from what was entirely generated by AI that had no human intervention whatsoever, and give a break for those people who are not native speakers, who maybe don't have the access to expertise that they use the AI for. Yeah.
Yeah, I was hearing that if you actually feed like a prompt from a student like from the 90s that obviously wasn't done using AI, it can also say it's still 85% AI. So it's just like what's absurd to me is this thing where like everybody's so obsessed and everybody uses it. Like, I mean, very few people like their concerns around like I think I'm trying to learn more about like the concerns about like the impact and like who owns it, all those things. But then at the same time, we're so excited, we're investing a ton of money. But then if you use AI, it's kind of like a red flag. It's like, why did you use it? I was like, come on, you use it too. So like I think when we try to do for pre-review, and you mentioned for the policy, it is so hard, right? Because if we're flooded right now, like if our server were flooded by like thousands of reviews written by AIs, we would be in trouble. And now I'm suggesting that we need to figure out how we're going to cope with that. But we do not, so we ask the reviewer, have you used AI to generate ideas? I do not care to label your review if you use AI for improving your sentence structure. I have used to that. I was like, that is not what I wanted to say. And like, you have a mind. But if it's entirely generated, you use AI to generate those ideas, there has to be a way to differentiate that from a person who put their own ideas, right? And someone can cheat and say, no, I didn't use AI, but we don't build for cheaters. We build for true change and for the people who are there for that. And so like we have to figure out, but what I'm going to say is like, I think it is just so weird how I keep seeing this, like, it's kind of a perverted thing. It's like, ooh, it's an amazing tool, but then if you use it, it means that you're less than. And it's like, again, what we're seeing is that we're replicating those structures. If an African scholar or like if uses AI, then it's one more reason to say I don't trust you. But then if the professor at Harvard uses AI, oh, they probably use it just like to clarify their ideas or something. It doesn't matter what tools we bring on if we don't combat those beliefs that are so entrenched. And of course, not everybody wants to, because retaining power, it always worked, right? And it's great. But yeah, anyway, Jonny.
A really good way to think about AI, actually building on that, is if you think about Wikipedia back in the day, back when I was growing up. Like when I was going through school, the worst thing you could do was go and reference anything on Wikipedia. And yet now it's probably one of the most reliable sources you can actually go to. And that is actually partly because there's been a big community effort around making it reliable, partly because there's some really weird rules and fights that go on there. But I think if we think about that a little bit and apply that to AI, that's probably kind of the same thing that's going on now. Give it another 5-10 years and we will hopefully be out of the AI is the best thing ever and it's also the worst thing ever at the same time kind of mentality.
I think it's no doubt that AI will play an important role in science. I think everyone have tried to use AI in some way. Maybe some good ways, for example, like English editing, which I also use that because I'm not an English native speaker. So I think that kind of use is great, and it's also help that non-English spoken country, the researcher from these countries, to have their voice and to show their idea in a much reader-friendly way. But there are also a lot of the researchers who just use AI to generate papers, which would not only hurt other people, but also hurt themselves. Maybe when they use that, they are not aware what will happen to them, to their careers. But this is a really serious challenge for the whole community. I think the most important thing for us is to use AI responsibility. Use it in the right way, and transparency is very important. People who use AI should be honest about that and disclose how they use the tool in their papers. That would build a trust between the whole system and help all of us. Also help us using AI in the right way and reduce the people who think AI is a bad thing or is something would destroy the whole science.
There's
Yes.
one thing that I want to comment is that one of the funny things is that actually AI have exposed the traditional publishing system. And we now see a lot of news about papers that were peer-reviewed by a journal, but they are so apparently AI generated. So I think this is also a win for open science. It shows that a peer-reviewed article in a journal does not really mean that it's really peer-reviewed, and it's not of less quality than a preprint.
I think there's also peer review, yes, where reviewers use AI tools, but maybe we can also discuss a little bit AI being used to generate reviews that are being submitted, and this can be either to journals or preprint platforms. Sometimes I wonder, what's the purpose there? And we are seeing a little bit of an increase of AI generated content. Do you have any opinions on this, or why might it be happening so much?
I mean, I feel like people love shortcuts. And if we are doing let's say that now founders are saying oh, we'll reward preprint review, right? We are doing a lot of things to have your activities, if you want to, as a reviewer, visible on your ORCID, so that when that moment comes, you can get through recognition. I can imagine that will spike. because then numbers. When you start like reducing everything to like a number, then people, and it's not, I don't even want to call it cheating. Some will be purposely cheating, but some are like just trying to stay afloat in a system that is like completely, messed up. So like I don't, completely blame someone saying, but the problem is that it's like if we want to come back to like what is that we're asking, like the AI will not generate an actual review. We'll just like it may be very good at connecting with other literature. So I think someone said like there is no evil in anything specifically. It's like how you use it. If we just start saying like, oh, we have this model that is the perfect reviewer, is unbiased, all of these things you're talking about, it's going to be gone. Of course, that's not true, because if you really know how AI is generated, the bias is coded in there. So it makes it even harder to detect. But also like it's going to like re-spit out whatever was in. So it's not like a true generation of ideas. It can give you prompts. So I don't really know how, like, I think detecting the use of AI, like some people are investing a lot of money into like figuring out if someone has used AI. It maybe, but then it's like, why are we investing so much in like, those are the same company who are actually buying those AI to use it themselves to like, screen through CVs or things like that. So I don't really know. I don't have an answer. So I'm rambling. It's just like, it goes back to like, I don't know, I think training and really thinking critically about why are we using these tools and what are we actually building? What do we want at the end? If we go to a conference, those papers are all AI and the reviewers are AI, like, why is that worth my time to go to that conference? I don't, we lose all of the amazing things that, I don't know, we have as people. I don't know, but that's me. Sorry.
Yeah, I think exactly like what Daniela said, it's not something that we're going to be able to control. But I think we could be able to guide people on how to use it. And I think Jonny have touched on that, and creating guides. Because, for example, for me, I'm talking about me personally as an African scholar, I wasn't trained, for example, before joining peer review, on how to be a reviewer. So maybe a scholar who don't have access to such training could use the AI to help them, for example, how to start the review process, how to write the review report. So I think instead of, as Daniela said, instead of us focusing on preventing its use or limiting its use, it's going to be used, but we should try our best to teach people how to use it properly, in order to help the authors of the paper that you're reviewing, and also to help you as a reviewer gain skills and proficiencies that would help you in your career.
I think moving towards kind of closing now. The last question that was kind of highly voted, but I think we've touched upon it quite a lot. It has to do with visibility, reducing publication bias, reshaping equity in research. So all of these are kind of benefits and a role preprint plays in the ecosystem of open science. So maybe as a closing discussion, what kind of best practices or some tips can we give to the audience? For example, I believe Jonny mentioned that it's best, or someone in the chat, to post a preprint 1 month before going to the journal, or 19% increase in citations if you publish a preprint. So what, kind of, can we give the audience as a takeaway message or something that they can do and how they can use preprints better? Jonny.
Yeah, so there is data. I think the guide I've just shared in the chat has the data in it as to why you should publish a month earlier. The things I would suggest are publish a month earlier, make sure that it is well written and well prepared. This is, in many ways, someone said it recently, it's scarier to post a preprint than it is to submit to a journal, because the whole world is going to see it, and they will comment if it's bad in particular. Make sure that your data is included. There's one of the big problems with preprints is that people don't include links to the data when they post a preprint, which is really annoying. But so include your data in there. And then when you do post it, shout about it and tell everyone about it. One of the things, we all say preprints make things more equitable, but you still need to do the work to do that. Social media is a really big part of that. It doesn't make it equitable, but it does help level that playing field a little bit. So now you don't have to come from a big lab, but if you've got a big social media following, that can help you. And being involved in discussions and just getting out there can really help with that. So I would say those are my best bits of advice.
Someone in the chat, and I didn't respond to the chat because I've been too long, but did mention like, oh, we shouldn't judge like knowledge just because of someone it comes from Africa and therefore so that mindset is what I was trained to have years and years ago. The mindset of that is, if we were in a perfect world where everybody's truly equal, yes, what matters is science. What matters is knowledge. What matters is really is this true? Is this something that contributes truly to our knowledge? The problem is that we don't live in that world. We live in a world in which there is the same output with a different name is evaluated differently. We know this. Studies have shown it over and over, that our beliefs, that you know it or not, shape our perception and shape the perception of AI too, just because we humans put that in there. So that idea of we shouldn't be equity really is about bringing more resources when more resources are needed to really get to that point. Equality is a dream, and I want to get there. But before we get to equality, we need to do a lot more work to truly bring everyone to that point in which the only thing that matters is the research. And it's because that's not true. So that's kind of what I really want us to get out of that, because I would love to be in that world, but we're not. And therefore, we do need to have these conversations. And it's not because we need to give a leg up to who doesn't deserve it. That's not what we're talking about.
Yes, Lamis?
I think for me, I would encourage everyone to look at preprinting and open science as, especially in our communities, is that it's breaking the cycle. The cycle has to be broken. It has, you have to think of the future, because yes, those at the top, the system has been working for them very well and they've reached the top, but it's sometimes it's good to know that you're not the only one who's struggling, and you're not the only one who needs these open science practices. But also know that if you start voicing your opinion and starting leading by doing, more and more are going to join you, because you're all suffering from this system. And what I love about empowering grassroots researchers is that a few years down the road, they are going to be at the top. So it's really good to try your best to work on changing the practices and mentality of this demographic, because I think in a few years, and time is flying these days, in a few years they're going to be leading the way, and things are going to be much easier.
Lloyd, any closing remarks from your side?
Yeah, I think it's important for researchers to check the general policy about preprints before they submit their papers to any preprint service. It sometimes causes issues because there are still free journals that not accept preprints. So, and if you get your preprints post and with a DOI, then it would be a really difficult thing to do to remove it from the internet. It's almost impossible to do that. Sometimes it would be really challenging for you to later submit to a journal who don't accept preprints. So if you're not sure about their preprint policy, the easiest way to do that is email to them and ask if it's okay to submit a preprinted paper to them. Yeah, that's the thing I want to say.
Well, thank you, everyone, and for all the participants that stayed with us all the way to the end. I know it was a little bit long of a webinar, but I think, we covered so many important topics and the need for, further education, further support, and just an entire community effort to really bring open science into the future and to really build upon what we have already started.